Good morning and welcome to today's episode of the Merkle Market Update. My name is Huntrods. I am one of the retirement planners here at Merkle Retirement Planning, and today I'm excited to be talking to you about some frequently asked questions that we get about life insurance planning. Life insurance planning, much like retirement planning, it changes and evolves throughout life. Depending on the life stage that you're in, different strategies might make more or less sense. So today, the first question that I get most frequently is, do I still need life insurance? Typically when we're young, term insurance is the most cost-effective way to buy the most death benefit for the least amount of monthly or annual premium. And that's important because when you're young, you obviously haven't been working as long. You probably have some larger outstanding debts as in your mortgage that you likely haven't paid off yet. And you haven't saved for retirement for as long, so there's a bigger financial risk should something happen to one spouse prematurely. So term insurance makes a lot of sense when you're young. It's cheap and it covers all of those risks. Then as you transition and you get closer to retirement, you've worked for a longer period of time, you've saved more for retirement, you hopefully have more equity in your home, or maybe you're even debt free. And so some of those big financial risks have been addressed or met, and they're not as big of a concern. That's when the conversation shifts a little bit. So as we think about transitioning from our working years into retirement, there are a number of decisions that come with that. So as you're thinking about what Social Security decisions to make, what pension decisions to make if you are so fortunate to have a pension, what percent survivorship are you going to choose on that pension as you think about retirement? We really want to make sure that we're addressing the survivorship planning, not only at point of retirement, but then throughout. And that's where maybe implementing some life insurance in retirement still makes sense. Because if you happen to have IPERs and you choose an option where your spouse doesn't continue to get 100% of that monthly income that you get while you're alive, then is your spouse going to be in a position where they will have less income coming in than they actually need should something happen to you? In that case, then is there enough other assets within the retirement portfolio to financially meet their desired lifestyle? So these are all pieces that we're looking at from a survivorship planning standpoint when we're talking about whether or not you still need life insurance. The second consideration is the tax planning piece. So in retirement, life insurance is one of the most tax efficient buckets to have, not only as we think about passing that legacy on to our loved ones and heirs, but also potentially as an income source for you in retirement. And that's where it's going to depend on the type of insurance that you implement. If it makes sense to look at some of these tax planning strategies, then we want to be very specific in the type of insurance that we utilize, which brings the question, term versus permanent. Term, like we talked about, typically gets you the most death benefit for the least amount of money. However, if a term policy expires and you never, ended up needing it, which is a good thing, then you put a lot of money into that insurance policy and you never received any benefit for that investment. And that's where permanent policies differ. So if you are paying monthly or annual premiums into a permanent policy, then it's going to gradually and eventually build up a cash value or an accumulation value. Now there's four common types of permanent life insurance policies. So we have kind of traditional whole life policies. And with whole life policies, that's a set death benefit and a set premium, and you're going to pay those premiums throughout your lifetime all the way until you pass. If you stop paying those premiums, then that policy will likely lapse. On the contrary of that, there are universal life policies. And the benefit to universal life policies is that they give you a little bit more flexibility on the death benefit and the premiums that you pay. So you can adjust the death benefit up or down depending on whether or not you want to continue paying premiums, whether or not you want to use the cash value to pay the premiums for you. So it just gives us a little bit more wiggle room for the what ifs of life. If you get to a point where you can't afford the premiums, then we can adjust how that policy works. There's kind of two subcategories underneath that universal life option. There's the variable universal life and the indexed universal life. And those two differ in how they can be invested. So oftentimes with these universal life policies, the cash value, it can be invested. And whether it's invested at risk in the market or it's simply tied to an index on the upside is going to be the difference between the variable and the indexed. So with variable policies, you can actually lose money on the cash value side. If the investments do poorly, that cash value can essentially go away. It can be completely depleted by that investment risk. Now, historically, is that likely? That's going to depend on what it is specifically invested in. So this can get a little bit complicated. But then with the indexed option, the indexed universal life, now you can tie your cash value allocation to, for example, the S&P 500. But the difference is you get to participate in some of the upside potential of that index, but you don't risk that cash value going backwards. So if we see, a month or a year, a month like March or a year like 2008, that policy is going to grow along the way, but then it's not going to experience the downside that comes with investment loss. So that's just a little bit about how some of the most common types of permanent policies work, and how you might utilize something like that within your plan is going to depend on what's most important and what's most concerning to you in your retirement picture. Another important piece is the legacy. So I mentioned being able to utilize life insurance for tax-free income, and that's a great tool to have in your retirement tool belt, whether it's in a Roth IRA or it's in something that's life insurance based. Being able to control our tax liability and our spendable income in retirement is a really important element that we think everyone should be focused on. Because at the end of the day, the money that you get to keep and spend is really what your retirement is all about. And so if we can mitigate some of that tax risk with a life insurance strategy within the portfolio, then that's going to be beneficial to you. But if you don't need it for income, or if you don't utilize it fully for the income component, then it typically will pass tax-free to your beneficiaries, your loved ones. And that's kind of the third important characteristic of life insurance, is the tax-free legacy that it can create. And this is important because of the Secure Act that passed in December of 2019. So the Secure Act changed how retirement accounts are passed on to the next generation. And instead of our kids and as baby boomers kind of transition into retirement and then leave that legacy to their children or their loved ones, it used to be that those beneficiaries that did inherit the money could then stretch those accounts out throughout the course of their retirement, only being mandated to pull out a minimum amount each year. With the Secure Act, now those accounts have to be liquidated over a 10-year time frame. So implementing a little bit of a life insurance strategy might make sense if it means you're using some of those taxable assets, some of the money from a tax-deferred IRA to fund that life insurance that's then tax-free to the next generation. It might help you create that tax-efficient legacy if that's a goal for you. And so those are some of the conversations that we talk about or consider when we are talking about life insurance planning throughout retirement. The next question that we get: what are some of these accelerated death benefits that you might see or hear about? And this is kind of neat because it gives you the ability to utilize your life insurance policy during your lifetime if you should need long-term care or if you're diagnosed with a terminal illness. So with the long-term care risk, that's something that is unpredictable in everyone's circumstances, but we don't necessarily get excited about paying money for a long-term care insurance policy, because if you don't ever need it, then you put a lot of money into something that you never received a benefit for. The benefit to utilizing a life insurance type strategy is that you can access a portion of that death benefit to then cover that long-term care cost. So it's a way for you to address a little bit of that long-term care risk, but if you don't need long-term care, then it still goes to create that tax-free legacy to your loved ones. The last thing that I want to talk about this morning is some things to keep in mind as you are naming beneficiaries on your life insurance policies. We see a couple pretty common mistakes with this, and that's that there is no contingent beneficiary listed on the policy, or someone's estate is listed as the primary beneficiary. Now, the issue with missing contingent beneficiaries is just the one-off chance that, let's say you and your spouse are traveling together or in a car accident together, and you should both happen to pass away at the same time. Then the default in Iowa, because there are no contingent beneficiaries named, is for the proceeds of that life insurance policy to go through probate. And that's simply not required. One, it's going to increase your taxable gross estate, and in turn your taxable estate. And it's so simple, just to name, whoever you would want that life insurance death benefit to go to as a contingent or contingent beneficiaries. The last piece with the beneficiaries is if you name the estate, which is relatively common, then again, it's going not only through probate, which is a long drawn out process, but it kind of negates the tax efficiency of a death benefit of a life insurance policy. So currently the estate and gift tax exclusions and exemptions are pretty high, and most people aren't necessarily concerned about taxable estate because it's a little over $22 million for a married couple or a little over $11 million for a single. And most people feel that, that's probably not a position that they're going to get to in their lifetime. But if we think about all of the things that get included in that gross estate, and if you have a life insurance policy with, a $500,000 or $1 million death benefit, plus you add in, any real estate that you have, any vehicles, other assets that you own at the time of your passing, it can add up in a hurry, but in addition to that, it can change. So the gift and estate tax exemptions have changed each year, and most recently were increased in 2018, but can always be reverted back to a much lower amount. In fact, in 2026, they're set to go back to the levels that they were at in 2017, which was $5 million per individual. What I would caution you is, what if they are lowered even more than that as a way to generate more federal tax revenue? It's certainly not, there's historical precedent for legislative changes, so that is one area that if we can be more efficient by simply naming individuals on our life insurance policies, the beneficiaries, then why not do that? And why not be proactive and as efficient as possible on that piece of it? The last thing that I want to talk about is ownership of life insurance policies. So a common mistake that I see as we look at our families and prospects' life insurance statements is that individuals are owning their own life insurance policies. And what a lot of people don't understand about that is that if you own your life insurance policy at the time of you passing away, then automatically, no matter how you have the beneficiaries named on the policy, the proceeds of that death benefit are going to go through your gross estate because of the way that the IRS has set up the rules around life insurance ownership. So if you're married, you should definitely consider owning a policy on your spouse and vice versa, because that will then negate any ownership rights that you would have at the point of the insured passing away. So the life insurance, piece of the planning can get a little complicated, but there's a lot of flexibility in it. And I think anytime there's flexibility with these different planning principles, it gives us a lot of freedom to build the plan out the way that it makes the most sense for you. So if you have questions on, maybe how to incorporate life insurance planning within your retirement, or anything that I talked about today raised a concern or a question, and you want to talk about your specific circumstances, you can go ahead and either call our office, or if you go to merkleplan.com, you can access our calendar right there on our website, and you can set up a 15-minute phone call to talk with one of the retirement planners in our office and just get those questions answered so that you can help bring your retirement vision to life with some of the information that we've shared today. So thank you so much for joining me on today's edition of Merkle Market Update, and we look forward to seeing you next week.